opposite of what we've been all told our whole lives, right? Why fat is the key to sustained weight loss.
Yeah,
good health.
Who would have thunk it, right?
Aren't we not supposed to have fat in our diet? Isn't it bad for us? Doesn't it create
Yeah.
heart disease and high cholesterol and all these other things that are bad for us? Or is it actually...
That's what we were all taught, right? That's the whole line. Our government told us to eat 6 to 11 servings of bread, rice, cereal, and pasta today, to eat a low-fat diet. And fats and oils were sparingly only at the top supposed to be eaten. And yet that advice led to the worst obesity epidemic and diabetes epidemic in the history of mankind.
That's like the food charts that we all saw in school, right?
Completely opposite of what we should be doing.
Now,
and so the science has caught up with this bad advice. And the advice, unfortunately, Lewis, was based on really shoddy science, on very weak evidence, on a few population studies, not really experimental studies. In fact, all the experimental studies that told us to eat low-fat diets, they actually didn't tell us that we should be doing that. They were actually contradicting the recommendations that were developed in 1980 by the UK and the USA.
Really?
So basically, if you looked at the actual randomized controlled trials there weren't that many, but there was a few of them, they all said that eating low-fat wasn't beneficial. But the population...
These were outside of the U.S. trials?
No, trials all over. Trials in the U.S.
Okay.
They just didn't look at that evidence. So the guideline committees who were working on it they sort of dismissed that evidence. And they had this theory, and they went with the theory. But because it made sense, right? If you look at calories, for example, fat has 9 calories per gram. Carbs and protein have 4 calories per gram. So you think, well, gee, if it has more calories per gram, if you eat less of it, you're going to lose more weight. It's logical.
Right.
But unfortunately, metabolism is not a math problem. You know?
Yeah.
It's a metabolic problem. It's a hormonal problem. It's not energy balance. The whole idea of calories in, calories out. This is the biggest crock of you-know-what that's been pushed on the American public, because there's a message implicit in that, which is if you just told someone to lose weight by eating less and exercising more, if they don't do it, it's their fault, right? Just eat less, exercise more. And if you don't, you're a lazy glutton. Right? So it's your fault you're fat.
Okay.
Right? But the truth is that it's not. It's not just about calorie balance. In fact, that's what the Global Energy Balance, quote, Global Energy Balance Network, which was actually funded by Coca-Cola, and they actually funded university scientists to kind of be the front people for this nonsense that's all about calories in, calories out, has been completely discredited. The New York Times wrote a big expose of this, but what we've been taught is that all calories are the same. They're actually not. So food is not just energy, it's actually information. It gives instructions, right? So this is like a big breakthrough in science, right? So food is not just calories, it's actually information. So the information in food communicates with your body every single minute. So every bite you take, it turns on or off genes that create health or disease, that make you lose or gain weight. It turns on or off hormones that make you lose or gain weight or create health or disease.
It's like a feedback for you.
It's direct instructions, and it works minute by minute. It's not something that takes a long time. It regulates inflammation. It regulates your hormones, as I said. It regulates your brain chemistry. It regulates even your gut microbiome, all the flora in your gut that we now know are linked to everything from weight gain, diabetes, to heart disease, to cancer, to autoimmune diseases, and so many other things.
It's the gut health, right?
Even depression and ADD and autism may be linked to changes in your gut flora. So we now know that when you eat food, it's not just about the energy in it. Because if that was true, then you could just survive on soda all day, and it wouldn't matter as long as you only ate 1,800 calories of soda. And I had this argument.
Right.
I had this argument with the vice chairman of Pepsi. We had dinner together, and I'm telling you.
No way.
Yeah, we had dinner. And the guy in between us, because I was sitting here, he was sitting here, the guy was like being in the middle of like a war zone. And I said to him, how can you say that eating 1,800 calories of soda is the same as having 1,800 calories of broccoli or almonds?
Right.
He says, well, as long as you have that amount of calories, it's not going to be any different. I said, this is just not how the body works.
You're not getting the nutritional value from that, right?
Right. I mean, it's not even nutritional. So just like look at 1,000 calories, let's say 750 calories of broccoli is 21 cups, 35 grams of fiber, half a teaspoon of sugar, and tons of phytonutrients, phytochemicals that upregulate your genes that actually help you prevent cancer, that improve hormone metabolism, so many things, right? Same calories from a big gulp, 750 calories, 46 teaspoons of sugar, right? High fructose corn syrup upregulates your liver to turn on a fat production factory that makes high triglycerides.
Stores fat more, right?
Stores fat, lowers triglycerides. Raises triglycerides, lowers the good cholesterol, causes a fatty liver, raises hormones that make you, in women, make them grow hair on their face and have lost hair on their head. Men, they drops their testosterone. They have no sex drive and they lose their hair on their bodies. All this from the same calories, right?
The number of calories.
Calories are the same, but the information in the food is very different. So now we have this concept that is actually really about the I call it the hormonal hypothesis, which I talk about in Eat Fat, Get Thin, which is how do you change your hormones so you're not hungry all the time? Because
that's the key.
The typical advice: you eat low fat, and your fat actually makes you satisfied, right? Because if you eat fat, you're not craving all the time, you're not hungry, and it actually is a brain food because it actually stops the addiction center in the brain from turning on. So you never feel hungry or have any cravings. It also speeds up your metabolism. Fat speeds up your metabolism. Yeah.
So it helps you burn more fat.
Helps you burn more fat. It releases fat from the fat cells.
Interesting.
Right. So it makes you less hungry. It makes you burn more fat, and it liberates the fat from the fat cells. So it's really a powerful. Whereas if you eat sugar, the opposite happens. You get hungrier because you increase insulin. I used
to have so much sugar.
It's terrible.
I was addicted to it.
All of us were. I mean, I was too. I was a vegetarian. I eat like tons of whole wheat bread and sugar and honey and everything. Grape nuts and ice cream for breakfast.
That was my life, right? So when did you stop? When did the research become known, or the facts or the data become known?
It's not even. It's honest. That's why I wrote this book.
Because you're a doctor and you were eating sugar.
No, it's not even.
When did you start to realize, and when did this information about fat become?
Well, it's been mounting for decades, right? So it's building on a mountain of evidence. And in the book, I reviewed over 1,000 studies, or 500 quoted in the book that I referenced. They wouldn't let me put more because there was no room in the back of the book.
Yeah.
And it's all well documented, and the science of this is very powerful. One of my colleagues, David Ludwig, wrote a book called Always Hungry. He's a Harvard professor, and he's done a lot of the research that this is based on, where he actually gave two groups of people same calories, but changed the percents of fat and carbs. And it was a very well-controlled study. And in the first group, they had 60% carbs, 20% fat, 20% protein. The other group switched it, 60% fat, 20% carbs, 20% protein. So it's the opposite. And the group that had the high-fat diet burned 300 calories more a day by doing nothing else.
Really? Just by having more fat?
By eating more fat. Their metabolism sped up 300 calories a day. It's like running.
Same amount of calories, though.
They ate the same amount of calories in.
But they burned 300 more.
Right, because their metabolism sped up.
Interesting.
Right. So in other words, it's like running an hour a day without getting off the couch.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
That's powerful.
Very powerful.
Yeah. And I know for me, as I've seen myself and my patients, the transformation's amazing, and their cholesterol gets better. It's totally contradictory.
Yeah.
Right? Fat is supposed to raise your cholesterol. Right? Eating cholesterol is supposed to raise your cholesterol. But for the first time since the dietary guidelines came out in 1980, the U.S. government in 2015 completely reversed their stance on fat. There's no more restriction. Like first week of January 2016.
This year. Like a few weeks ago. They just changed this.
They changed this completely.
The whole guide.
Completely. So first time they said, forget about fat. You can eat as much as you want. No way. No limit on fat.
This is the government.
The government. The Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee established these recommendations. This is a scientific group that establishes guidelines for the government, helps them shape policy, and then the government makes the policy. They kind of
based around this research or this.
Yeah, they said, don't worry about fat, don't worry about cholesterol. Eggs are back, right? Eggs are back. Forget about the egg white omelets. Just eat the whole egg.
No way.
Completely. And they said it made me laugh. They said cholesterol is no longer a nutrient of concern. Quote, nutrient of concern. Like, well, we got it wrong for 35 years.
No way.
Yeah.
So it's like.
It's totally different. And they also said that we should, for the first time, they said we should reduce sugar. Now, the policy advisors, who are the scientists, said we should limit sugar-sweetened beverages because they're proven to be linked to obesity and diabetes. But the government, because of the food lobby, changed the wording to say, no, we should be restricting added sugars. So we should eat less added sugars. Now, What's an added sugar? It doesn't say added sugar on the label.
Right.
So how do you know? Because the food labeling from the FDA is also influenced by the food lobby.
Right.
So it should say added sugar on the label, not just sugar. Right. So you don't know.
Right. Interesting.
So it's designed to totally confuse people. But the truth is that this is a huge advance, and now we actually have come to realize that this is not true. So the science around fat and how your body burns fat and what makes you fat is all really clear now. And it's all based on this hormone idea of insulin, which is a fat storage hormone.
Yes.
So anything you eat that increases insulin, which is sugar, refined flour. I mean, white flour raises your blood sugar more than table sugar. So if you had 2 slices of white bread, it raises your blood sugar more than a tablespoon of table sugar. People are like, I'm eating whole wheat bread. It's just as bad. Unless the bread is so dense that you can stand on it without it squishing, then you shouldn't eat it.
Shouldn't eat it.
No, like the German rye bread.
I love bread, though.
Yeah, everybody
That's the
loves
challenge.
bread. Now, the bread we eat isn't the bread we ate, right? So our ancestors ate very different bread.
It's not the hard bread.
It was very coarse, and we only had the grain mills that started in the 1800s. Before that, we couldn't eat refined grain, and now even whole wheat is super refined. It's just,
And are all grains bad as well, in your opinion?
No, I don't think all grains are bad. I joke. I say, in the book, I talk about, an induction plan, like basically a way to get quick start to change you from like just being storing fat to burning fat to eating fat to makes you thin. And that's a 21-day plan. And after that, I talk about how you transition to what I call a pegan diet. Pegan, as opposed to paleo or vegan. It was kind of a joke because one day I was sitting
in between.
Yeah, I was sitting on a panel with 2 friends of mine. One was a vegan cardiologist, and the other was like a paleo doctor.
Sure.
And I was like, well, I don't know. I guess I must be a pegan because I'm in the middle here.
Okay. What does a pegan diet look like?
So a pegan diet, what's amazing, Louis, is that the principles of paleo vegan are often very similar. So both groups believe that we should be eating whole, unprocessed, unrefined foods.
Yes.
We should get rid of food additives,
Foods
hormones.
from the ground.
Everything. Yeah. No antibiotics, no hormones, no pesticides, no GMO. We should be having no MSG, no artificial sweeteners, no high fructose corn syrup. Everybody agrees that that's true. We also agree that everybody should be eating lots of fruits and vegetables.
Yes.
Right? A little heavy on the plant foods.
Yep.
Basic principles. Both agree that we shouldn't have dairy, which is interesting.
Yes.
Right? We'll talk about that.
Paleo, no dairy as well.
No
right?
dairy, right.
Yeah.
No dairy. No
I guess
vegan.
there's some of them that say like some specific cheeses or something.
Yeah, grass-fed butter. There's some things, but but the proteins in dairy are very inflammatory, and the dairy again we eat isn't the dairy we ate. We've hybridized our cows; it's all fertilized by one bull.
It's not organic dairy.
And it's not organic. It's not raw. It's not how our ancestors ate it. Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Even organic cows, they milk them when they're pregnant, and they're just full of hormones. So,
okay.
And also, it's just not always tolerated well by many people.
Right.
And then,
what else do they both have in common?
Everybody agrees that we should be eating foods that are phytonutrient rich, that are nutrient dense, and we should be eating lots of nuts and seeds and lots of good oils like avocados and olive oil.
What's phytonutrient? What does that mean?
Phytonutrient is a chemical that's in plant foods. Phyto means plant, and it's not a vitamin or mineral. It's not a protein, fat, or carb or fiber. It's something else. So, for example, like broccoli has glucosinolates, which upregulates detoxification.
Okay.
Catechins are in green tea, which are powerful detoxifiers of metal, powerful antioxidants. Tomatoes have lycopene, which is a powerful cancer preventer for prostate cancer.
Okay.
Anthocyanidins. You can have black rice, which has anthocyanidins, which are powerful antioxidants that are in black rice. It's emperor's rice. Love that. It's also very low glycemic.
Sure.
So I think the things that they disagree on are basically beans, grains, and meat. Like where you get your protein from. Everything else is the same.
Paleo and vegan is the same. Except for meat, beans.
And protein. I mean, beans, grains, and protein.
Beans, grains, and protein. Okay.
Right. And I mean, meat.
Right.
And so, what I realize is that, I think many people who are sick do better when you take out certain things that can be inflammatory or high glycemic. So if you're, for example, carbohydrate intolerant and you're diabetic, which affects a lot of people, I talk about how do you find out if you're carbohydrate intolerant in the book, which is there's a questionnaire you can tell if you actually know if you're someone who's carbohydrate intolerant, like someone who's gluten intolerant. That means if they eat a lot of starch, if they have like 2 cups of rice, even if it's brown rice or 2 cups of beans, it can adversely affect their sugar. So I talk about like having less, like having smaller portions of beans and grains.
Sure.
and non-gluten grains in particular, because gluten can be very inflammatory for many people. I think for some people who don't react to it, it can be fine, but not in large amounts. Mm-hmm. And then I think meat is the big issue, right? So meat is the big issue. So should we be eating meat?
We just had dinner the other night.
Right.
We both had meat, right?
We had fish.
We had fish.
We had black cod.
Yes, that's great.
Which was awesome.
I had a mahi. You had a black cod. Is that what it was?
Oh, I had the black cod.
Yeah,
I had the black cod. The guy next to me had meatballs.
Yeah. Guy next to me had carne asada.
But so the issues around meat also, I think, are everybody agrees, and fish. Everybody agrees that if anybody eats meat, it should be humanely raised. It should be sustainably raised. It should be grass-fed. It should be not harming the environment. The ethical and the environmental issues around animal eating are big, and they're real.
Yeah.
I mean, I have many Buddhist patients. I have a Buddhist monk who's like an abbot who's is a diabetic, and he's never going to eat an animal. So I need to help him understand he's never going to eat an egg, how to eat a higher fat protein diet, which is low glycemic. Right. So we can do that.
Okay.
Right. So more nuts and seeds. Less rice, more beans. Just there's strategies for doing that.
Sure.
And he did great. He lost 35 pounds, reverses diabetes, and now I have tons of bun people, praying for me.
That's great.
Yeah, and then the meat thing is tricky because it's also an environmental risk. If you're eating factory farmed animals, there's antibiotics in that, and there's runoff from the pesticides and fertilizers that damages our water supply and rivers and lakes. There's climate change that happens from the methane produced. It's more toxic to the environment than carbon dioxide. There's high energy use. 1/5 of all our fossil fuels are used for growing animals for human consumption. Our water is being used up at incredible rates for feeding animals. There's basically I think 70% of all water use, and there's basically only 5% of the world's surface is fresh water.
It's usable.
It's fresh water.
Yeah.
Right, 1% is in Russia.
Wow.
And at least 4% for the rest of us, and 70% of that is being used for feeding animals for human consumption. So there's real environmental issues.
Sure.
So I think a factory farming should be not supported in any way, and we need to change that. And that means we need to change our patterns of consumption around meat. We need to downsize our meat consumption. I call it having condiment. Condiment, as opposed to like a condiment, like condiment. It should be a side dish or a dressing if you're going to eat it.
Sure.
And I think
not a full plate of steak. You mean?
I think there's three issues with meat, right? There's environmental issues, there's moral issues, and there's health issues. So we kind of talked about the moral. I think that's people are entitled to their beliefs, and they should be able to follow whatever they want and be healthy. The environmental issues are real, and I think everybody would agree, whether they're paleo-vegan, that we need to stop harming the environment. And I think even if you're not paleo-vegan, everybody really believes that. In fact, the Dietary Advisory Committee that was advising the government said we should limit meat consumption because of the environmental impact. Right now, if you have grass-fed meat, if you have sustainably raised meat, you can't. It's not as abundant. You can't produce as much, and so we all have to eat less of it.
Right,
and it's more expensive. So, but that's okay. And I think that from a health point of view, when I really looked at the literature, and I did this in Eat Fat Get Thin, I looked at all the research that I could find on meat because I'm like, well, I don't know.
You want to know for yourself too.
Yeah, I'm recommending to my patients. I'm a human too, and I want to live a long time, and I don't want to be doing something stupid.
Yeah.
So I wanted to find out what does the science tell us about meat.
So you did all the research.
So I looked at all the research, and I wrote 8,000 words in the book on meat.
Wow.
There's a lot of research in there. And I addressed all these issues, environmental, moral, and the health issues were quite interesting. When we look at the studies on meat, and anybody can quote anything saying anything, right?
Right.
So you want the paleo people like, meat's healthy, here's all the research. And the vegan like, meat's going to kill you, here's all the research. Yeah. So it's like, and then you're at the average Joe, you're totally confused. And your average doctor, you're totally confused because we get no training in nutrition.
And they haven't done the research themselves.
So
they're going off of their opinion or their theory.
Yeah, they're like average people like the rest of us in terms of nutrition science. They don't know because it's not what we learn, right? Yeah. I mean, I just am at Cleveland Clinic, and we implemented a nutrition curriculum for the first time in the medical school. They have this integrated in, which is so great. And
that's awesome.
I helped Tim Ryan, who's a congressman from Ohio, introduce Tim. You love Tim. He's great. Has he been on the show?
He's been on here, yeah.
He's great. Introduce a bill called the Enrich Act, which was a bill that is funding $15 million to fund nutrition in medical schools, nutrition education for doctors.
Interesting. That's what we need the most because doctors
Yeah.
a lot of the time I feel like could heal a lot of their patients
With
through food.
Oh, my God. Well, food is the cause of most chronic disease. It's the cure for most chronic disease, and yet doctors know nothing about food.
And they just medicate a lot of the times.
I mean, listen, it's so bad. I mean, I use food as medicine. That's food is the most powerful drug on the planet. I mean, that's why last week I was in Cleveland at the hospital teaching 300 black women how to cook in a cooking class. Like, that's what doctors should be doing, because that's how I'm going to get people healthy.
That's real medicine, right?
That's real medicine.
Now, just a quick side note. What is your involvement with, what is functional medicine, and what is your involvement at the Cleveland Clinic?
Can I finish my meat?
Yes, go ahead.
I was still rolling on the meat, and then we'll talk about functional medicine, and then we'll talk about Cleveland Clinic.
Perfect.
Because people want to know. Like, they're like, well, what about meat? They're like probably listening.
Yeah, let's do it.
So the science.
8,000 words.
I'm not going to give you 8,000 words, but I'll give you a few hundred.
Perfect.
So the science of meat was fascinating. So when I looked at the studies that showed it was harmful, here's what they were. They were mostly population studies, meaning they looked at groups of people, followed them, and then they asked questions of them. What did you eat last year? What did you eat last week? What did you last month? And they basically do these food frequency questionnaires, and then they correlate that with the risk of disease. And they try to control for all the confounding factors, but it's very tough. So the people who ate meat, they had more heart disease and more cancer and more death. But what else was?
They were smoking, they were drinking,
exactly.
they weren't sleeping,
right, exactly.
Stressed out.
So if you look at the data, they ate 800 more calories a day.
Yeah.
They almost ate no fruits and vegetables.
Tons of sugar.
They had tons of sugar and processed food, lots of fried foods. Drank more, smoked more, didn't exercise, and didn't take any vitamins and minerals. Well, guess what? They weren't as healthy as the other people. So most of the studies were like that. Now, there was a few studies that were interesting I found. One was a study of 11,000 people who shopped at health food stores. And they found there were like a lot of vegetarians and a lot of meat eaters. So who are the people who are, like healthy meat eaters who only eat grass-fed meat, or who, because most of these studies were not on grass-fed meat either. They were on factory farm meat, right? So then again, how do you generalize that?
Sure.
But then there were these 11,000 people, and they followed them for many years, and they found that the meat eaters and the vegetarians, there was no difference in their health outcomes. Exactly the same. So if you're a meat eater who basically eats a healthy diet and has grass-fed meat versus a vegan or vegetarian, no difference in health outcomes.
And you have a healthy lifestyle.
Healthy lifestyle, then there's no difference. So there's other factors like how it affects your gut flora and so on, and I think, those are more complicated issues. I address all of them in the book, but at the end of the day, I think it's okay if you have no moral issues and you can eat sustainably raised meat and not in great quantities, and as part of your diet, I think it's okay.
You want to learn about the key foods you need to eat to master your health? Make sure to watch this video right here.
The lining of our gut and actually break through the border.
Really?
Yeah, they really do.
And that's what causes eczema and
bingo.
Causes breakouts.
Yeah, exactly. Acne, brain fog, irritable bowel.